Hidden away in old papers of the Wisconsin church area are documents the Catholic Church tried to hide for over 160 years. These papers talk about 23 nuns slowly disappearing from St. Mary's Convent near Lake Michigan, between 1854 and 1862. Church leaders said these were just mistakes or misunderstandings. But reports from 3 different church inspectors, plus a bunch of private letters found recently in a hidden space during renovations, tell a story so bad that even tough historians wonder if such evil could really happen in a holy place. What you're about to hear is the first full story of what many think is the most shocking case of church wrongdoing in American history. It's a case the Catholic Church spent a lot of money to keep quiet. Before we continue with St. Mary's Convent, if this story already makes you uneasy, please subscribe to our channel for more true stories about America's darkest religious secrets. Our group of mystery lovers is in all 50 states. Where are you listening from tonight? Leave a comment below. Now, let's go back to the Wisconsin countryside in 1854, where our story starts. The morning fog was thick over Lake Michigan as Bishop William Quarter's carriage entered the gates of what would become St. Mary's Convent. The Catholic Church bought the huge property, an old rich lumber man's house surrounded by 30 acres of thick woods. They wanted to build the first big Catholic place in the mostly Protestant Wisconsin area. This important move was part of a bigger effort to bring Catholic influence to America's fast-growing new lands, where Protestant churches were already becoming strong. The stone house with its 3 large sections and bell tower looked very different from the simple wooden churches in Wisconsin. The main building, built in 1842, had pointed arches and narrow windows that seemed to watch over the land. 2 sections stretched out from each side. The east section was for the nuns' rooms, the west for the planned orphanage and hospital area. Behind the main building was a small chapel, its tall spire rising above the trees, seen from miles away across the flat Wisconsin plains. Local Protestant families looked at the arriving nuns with suspicion. Their black clothes and Irish accents made them seem like outsiders in a community mostly of German and Scandinavian settlers. The people there, mostly Lutheran and Methodist, were used to the simple, equal way their own churches were run. The Catholic Church's strict system, with its rituals and secrets, felt strange and threatening. On the day the convent was made holy, a small crowd gathered outside the gates. Catholics, muttered Elijah Hoffman, a respected older man at the local Lutheran church, as he watched the black-robed figures walk into the chapel. They'll bring their foreign ways here, spoil our children with their idol worship. His friend, Wilhelm Schmidt, nodded sadly. My grandfather ran from Germany to escape Catholic persecution. Now they follow us even here. This feeling, though not everyone shared it, showed the deep religious tensions that would be the background for the sadness to come. St. Mary's will be a sign of God's kindness in this wild place, Bishop Quarter announced to the small group of priests and local important people at the holy ceremony. His voice echoed through the newly finished chapel, where morning light came through simple stained glass windows, making colorful spots on the wooden benches. Under the leadership of Mother Superior Catherine Murphy, this convent will offer shelter to orphans, comfort to widows, and healing to the sick. The bishop's Boston accent bounced off the stone walls as he introduced the 3 women who would lead the convent: Mother Superior Catherine, Sister Elizabeth Foster, and Sister Margaret Clark. All were from well-known convents in the East. Mother Superior Catherine stood tall and powerful in her neat black habit, her sharp face and strong stare demanding respect right away. At 42, she moved with the confidence of a woman used to being in charge. Her hands, when raised in prayer, were graceful but strong, hands that looked able to both comfort a child or correct a disobedient new nun. Those who met her often mentioned her eyes, an unusual pale blue that seemed to see through faking. Mother Catherine comes to us with the best recommendations, the bishop continued. Her work at St. Augustine's in Boston has prepared her well for the challenges of religious life on the frontier. Sister Elizabeth, 38, with her constant smile and soft voice, would be in charge of the orphanage. Plump and motherly, with rosy cheeks and gentle hands, she seemed perfect for caring for abandoned children. When she spoke, it was always with a slight pause, as if carefully thinking about each word, a trait many first thought was thoughtfulness rather than planning. Sister Margaret, 35, with her wide knowledge of plant medicines, would set up the infirmary. Tall and thin, with a serious look and quick fingers, she moved with the carefulness of someone who measured medicines precisely. Her dark eyes missed nothing, and her knowledge of both old and new medical practices had impressed doctors in Boston and New York. 20 younger nuns, most in their 20s and new from Ireland, completed the first group. They stood in a perfect line, habits neat, heads bowed in proper humility, as Bishop Quarter blessed each by name. Sister Agnes O'Connor, Sister Bernadette Walsh, Sister Teresa Donovan, Sister Mary Collins, young women who had left family and homeland to serve God in a strange new country. Their faces, though serious during the ceremony, sometimes showed their youth and uncertainty when they thought no one was watching. "The Lord has called us to this wilderness," Mother Catherine told her sisters that first evening. Candlelight made long shadows across the dining room, the smell of fresh bread and weak tea hung in the air, and the chill of the Wisconsin autumn seeped through the stone walls, despite the large fireplace at the room's end. "We will face difficulties unknown to our Eastern sisters. We will meet suspicion from those who fear our faith. But we will overcome through dedication and sacrifice." The young nuns, far from home and family, held on to her words like a lifeline in this strange new world. Sister Agnes whispered to Sister Bernadette as they got ready for bed that night, their narrow bed separated by barely an arm's length in the dormitory-style sleeping area. "Do you think the locals will ever accept us?" Her voice shook slightly, showing the brave face she had kept all day. Sister Bernadette squeezed her hand in the dark. "They feared our Lord too at first. We must show them through our good deeds that we mean only good." The whispered talk stopped suddenly at the sound of footsteps in the hallway, Mother Catherine making her rounds, making sure everything was in order on their first night. The convent quickly became a working religious community. The daily pattern of prayers began with morning prayers at 3 a.m., the bells ringing through the pre-dawn darkness, calling sleepy nuns from warm beds to cold chapel floors. The distinct sound of Latin songs filled the chapel 7 times daily, from those early morning prayers until night prayers at 9 p.m. The sound became as much a part of the local area as the wind through the pine trees or the distant lowing of cows. Between prayers, the nuns ran a small orphanage for abandoned children, cared for the sick in a simple infirmary, and kept large vegetable gardens. Their days followed a strict schedule: prayer, work, simple meals, short breaks, more prayer, a rhythm meant to focus the mind on God and service rather than personal comfort or desire. By the winter of 1854, the orphanage housed 12 children, mostly children of Irish immigrant workers who had died in railway or lumber accidents. Sister Elizabeth oversaw their care with clear kindness, teaching basic letters and numbers along with Catholic teachings. On Sundays, local families would sometimes visit after Mass, bringing small treats for the children and sometimes asking about adoption. Sister Margaret's infirmary started small but quickly gained respect among local families. Her knowledge of old remedies, poultices for swelling, herbal teas for fevers, special compresses for chest problems, proved effective, especially during the harsh Wisconsin winter when doctor visits meant dangerous travel through snow-filled roads. Their self-reliance impressed even the most doubtful neighbors, and slowly, the local attitude changed from suspicion to reluctant respect. "They keep to themselves but they do good work," Elijah Hoffman admitted grumpily to his church after Sister Margaret had successfully treated his grandson's constant cough. Their ways are not our ways, but perhaps there is room for different paths to heaven in this big country. Sister Agnes O'Connor, at 23, was one of the youngest nuns at St. Mary's. Her letters home to Ireland, kept in the Dublin church records, give a rare look into the early days of the convent. Her neat writing filled pages with observations about her new life, though careful readers might notice the gradually changing tone as months passed. "The work is harder than I ever imagined," she wrote in December 1854, the paper smudged, suggesting tears had fallen as she wrote. "My hands are raw from washing linens in ice-cold water, and the chapel stones feel like ice beneath our knees during morning prayers. But Mother Catherine tells us that our sacrifices please God. Sister Elizabeth has been especially kind, helping me get used to this strange country. She brings me extra blankets on the coldest nights, and has shown such patience in teaching me the proper care of the orphans. Sister Margaret's remedies saved us during a fever that spread through the orphanage last month," she continued. "The children burned with such heat we feared we would lose them all, but her mixture of willow bark and honey brought down their temperatures. I believe we are doing God's work, though I confess I still cry myself to sleep some nights missing the green hills of home." What these letters don't show, what Sister Agnes herself might not have fully understood, were the subtle changes already happening within St. Mary's walls. Mother Catherine's leadership style, at first just strict, had started to become controlling. Small breaking of convent rules, before handled with gentle correction, now resulted in increasingly harsh punishments. Sister Josephine Brady's hands shook as she tried to fix a tear in her habit one evening in January 1855. Having accidentally broken silence during afternoon prayers with a sudden cough, she had been told to kneel on dried peas while saying the entire rosary, a punishment that left her knees bleeding and swollen. Sister Mary Collins helped her thread the needle, their eyes meeting in a moment of quiet understanding. "Do not draw attention to her weakness," Mother Catherine's voice cut through the quiet workroom, making both women jump. She had entered silently, a skill that increasingly made the younger nuns uneasy. "Sister Josephine must learn that. Discipline is the foundation of devotion, each of you would do well to remember that." By the spring of 1855, St. Mary's had a reputation for great charity. When a measles sickness spread through nearby lumber camps, Sister Margaret's infirmary treated dozens of workers, no matter their faith. The convent began receiving small gifts from thankful families, and even Protestant ministers recognized the good work being done behind those stone walls. What no one outside the convent realized was that life inside St. Mary's was changing in subtle, troubling ways. The shared meals had become increasingly silent, with nuns keeping their eyes on their bowls of thin soup or plates of plain bread. The recreation hour, once filled with quiet talk and occasional laughter, became tense and quiet. Young women who had crossed an ocean together, connected by shared purpose and faith, now moved like shadows, careful not to attract attention. The first strange thing happened in April 1855, when Sister Agnes didn't show up for morning prayers. Her absence was noticed right away, one empty spot in the chapel where 20 nuns should stand in perfect order. The other sisters exchanged quick, worried glances as Mother Catherine entered, her expression unreadable in the dim candlelight. "Sister Agnes has been called to help at our mission in Minnesota," Mother Catherine announced to the confused group at breakfast, her tone allowing no questions. Her departure was sudden, as such callings often are. "We shall all pray for her success in this new effort." Sister Bernadette's spoon clattered against her bowl. "But Mother, she said nothing to me. And she stopped as Mother Catherine's pale eyes fixed on her face. "Are you suggesting, Sister Bernadette, that a bride of Christ needs permission from her friends rather than her leaders before answering God's call?" The question hung in the air like a chill. "No, Mother. Forgive Sister Bernadette lowered her eyes to her cooling porridge. No one had seen Sister Agnes pack or leave, and she had mentioned nothing of a move in her letters home. But in the strict order of convent life, no one dared question Mother Superior's explanation further. That evening in the dormitory, several nuns noticed Sister Agnes's few things: her prayer book, the small wooden rosary her mother had given her, the extra wool socks for Wisconsin winters, were gone, as if she had indeed packed and left. But Sister Mary Collins, whose bed was next to Agnes's, whispered to Sister Teresa Donovan during their brief moments alone in the garden. Her cloak still hung on its hook. Would she have left without it in April in Minnesota? Sister Teresa glanced nervously toward the convent windows. Perhaps she was given a new one for the journey. We should not guess, Sister. 3 months later, Sister Bernadette Walsh vanished in a similar way. The bishop has asked for Sister Bernadette's help with a delicate matter in Chicago, Mother Catherine explained. She left before dawn to catch the early train. Again, no goodbye, no warning. Just an empty room and a quickly given explanation. This time, Sister Elizabeth explained more during the nuns' work period. Sister Bernadette showed such skill with the orphans that the bishop has asked her to help set up proper ways at the new home for foundlings in Chicago. Her voice had the right mix of pride and holy acceptance. But Sister Mary noticed that her usually warm eyes remained cold as she spoke. By the winter of 1855, 3 more nuns had moved to distant missions. Each departure followed the same pattern. A young nun, usually one who had been noticed for her beauty or gentle nature, would simply not appear one morning. Mother Catherine would announce her new assignment, always to a place too far away to easily check. Letters sent by worried families to these supposed new assignments would come back months later with short, strangely formal answers that gave few details of their new lives. The answers, when looked at years later by handwriting experts, would all be identified as written by the same person, not the missing nuns themselves. Sister Teresa Donovan was one of the few who dared to speak her worries. Tall and strong from years of farm work before taking her vows, with a directness unusual in convent life, she had already drawn Mother Catherine's disapproval for questioning the increasingly harsh punishments given to younger nuns. It seemed strange that Rome would ask for so many transfers without proper papers, she whispered to Sister Mary Collins as they worked in the garden in the summer of 1856, their fingers stained with soil as they picked early carrots. The garden had grown that year with a new section for medicinal herbs that Sister Margaret cared for personally behind a high fence that only she and Mother Catherine could enter. And have you noticed it's always the youngest and prettiest who are called away? Sister Teresa continued, her Irish accent getting stronger as it always did when she was upset. First Agnes with her golden hair, then Bernadette with those lovely, singing voice, then Catherine with her perfect skin and Josephine with her. She stopped as a shadow fell across the garden bed. Sister Mary hushed her right away, looking nervously toward the convent windows where Sister Margaret stood watching, her thin face showing no emotion. Mother Catherine has her reasons. We must trust in her wisdom. The following week, Sister Teresa was gone. Called to a quiet retreat in Montreal, was the official explanation given at morning prayers. Sister Mary, now very scared, kept her head down and her thoughts to herself. That evening as she made her bed, she found a small piece of paper tucked under her pillow, a page torn from Sister Teresa's prayer book with, "If I disappear, tell Father Ryan." The sight of her friend's handwriting, the ink still fairly fresh, sent a chill through Sister Mary that had nothing to do with the autumn air seeping through the stone walls. By 1857, the pattern had become impossible to ignore inside the convent walls. Of the original 20 junior nuns, only 12 remained. The official explanations continued: special missions, retreats, transfers to nursing positions during disease outbreaks. To the outside world, St. Mary's continued to work normally. Local families still brought sick relatives to Sister Margaret's infirmary. Orphans still received care in Sister Elizabeth's orphanage. Sunday visitors saw nothing wrong in the serious processions of black-clad figures moving from chapel to garden to dining room. But inside those stone walls, fear had become a real thing. The remaining nuns spoke in whispers, avoided being alone, and watched in terror as their numbers shrank. Mother Catherine's leadership grew more like a dictator's. Small breaking of convent rules resulted in severe punishments, days of fasting, nights spent in prayer on cold stone floors, public confessions of increasingly personal sins. Sister Clare O'Donnell, found with a small piece of chocolate sent by her family, was forced to kneel before the entire community and confess to overeating and lying, unworthy of a bride of Christ. Mother Catherine told her to fast for 3 days, taking only water and a single piece of bread at evening meal. When Sister Clare fainted during chapel prayers on the 2nd day, it was Sister Margaret who woke her with smelling salts. Her thin lips curved in what some later described as a smile. One unusually cold night in January 1858, Sister Mary Collins woke to muffled sounds from the cell next to hers. Through the thin wall, she could hear Sister Rebecca Murphy sobbing, then a sharp whisper she recognized as Mother Catherine's voice, "You will come with us now. Make any noise, and you'll regret it." The sound of shuffling feet followed, then silence. Sister Mary lay frozen in her narrow bed, heart pounding so loudly she feared it would give away that she was awake. The floorboards creaked, 1, 2, 3 sets of footsteps moving away from Sister Rebecca's cell, then a sound that would haunt Sister Mary's dreams for years to come, a muffled cry, quickly silenced, followed by what sounded like a body being dragged rather than walking on its own. The next morning, Mother Catherine announced that Sister Rebecca had been called to serve at a new mission in the Dakota Territory. The native children there need teaching, and Sister Rebecca's patience with the orphans has prepared her well for this holy task. Mother Catherine's pale eyes swept the dining room, stopping for a moment on Sister Mary. "We shall miss her gentle presence, but rejoice in God's purpose for her talents." Sister Mary, shaking with fear, managed to stay calm through morning prayers. Her rosary beads clicked between trembling fingers as she whispered the familiar prayers, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. What had happened to Sister Rebecca? What had happened to all the others? That afternoon, while sweeping the hallway outside Mother Catherine's office, she overheard a disturbing conversation. The heavy oak door was not quite closed, and voices carried clearly to where Sister Mary stood, her dust brush suddenly still in her hand. "The doctor says this one will bring a higher price." Sister Elizabeth's usually gentle voice had taken on a cold, calculating tone that Sister Mary would not have recognized if she hadn't been listening at that very door. "He says men pay extra for the innocent ones." "We need to be more careful with the timing," Sister Margaret replied, the sound of glass clinking suggesting she was organizing her medicines as she spoke. "Free in 1 month raises questions. The bishop's secretary mentioned it in his last letter. The bishop is easily managed." Mother Catherine's dismissive laugh sent chills down Sister Mary's spine. "Another gift to his cathedral fund, and his questions will disappear. Besides, we've set up the pattern well enough. No one questions nuns being sent to frontier missions or dying from illness during their charity work." "What about the Collins girl?" Sister Margaret asked, her voice dropping lower. "She watches too closely. I've seen her listening at doors." A moment of silence followed, during which Sister Mary's heart nearly stopped. "We'll wait," Mother Catherine finally replied. "She's too plain to bring much, and she has that correspondence with her brother in the seminary. Making too many disappear at once attracts attention. Rebecca will keep the doctor's clients happy for now." Sister Mary fled before she could be found, her mind racing. What had happened to her missing sisters? What terrible fate had happened to Sister Rebecca just last night? And who was this doctor they mentioned? The pieces began to fall into a terrible place in her mind. The missing nuns, always the youngest and most attractive. The strange visits from well-dressed rich people who toured the convent with Mother Catherine. The unexplained sounds, sometimes, heard from the locked north section at night. The growing wealth of the convent, despite its supposed humble means. After a sleepless night of prayer and thinking, Sister Mary made a desperate choice. During her weekly duty collecting eggs from the chicken coop, the only time she was allowed outside the convent walls without being watched, she slipped a quickly written note into the pocket of Jimmy Fletcher, the 12-year-old son of a local farmer who delivered milk to the convent each morning. Jimmy's eyes widened as Sister Mary's hand brushed his pocket. She had never spoken to him directly before. The rules forbade casual conversation with outsiders, especially males of any age. "Please deliver this to Father Thomas at St. Joseph's Church in town," she whispered, pressing a small silver cross into the boy's hand. The cross had been her confirmation gift, the only valuable item she owned. "Tell no one else. Lives depend on it." The boy nodded seriously, his freckled face serious beyond his years. "Yes, sister, I promise." The note, which has been kept in church records, read simply, "Something evil happens at St. Mary's. Nuns disappearing. Not sent away as claimed. I fear for my life. Please send help. Sister Mary Collins." Father Thomas Ryan, the young, Irish priest who received the note, had always had doubts about Mother Catherine. During his monthly visits to offer Mass at the convent, he had noticed the shrinking number of nuns and found Mother Catherine's explanations vague and not consistent. But as a simple parish priest, he had limited power to question a Mother Superior. Father Ryan paced his small study, the worn floorboards creaking beneath his feet as he read and reread Sister Mary's desperate message. The silver cross lay heavy in his palm. He recognized it as the kind given to young women at confirmation, not something a nun would give away easily. The urgency of the message, combined with his own growing concerns, demanded action. But what action could he take against a Mother Superior, especially one as well-connected as Catherine Murphy? Rather than confronting Mother Catherine directly, Father Ryan traveled to Milwaukee to speak with his superior, Bishop John Henney. The journey took a full day by horseback, the late winter road switching between ice and mud. He arrived at the bishop's residence with his priest's robe spattered. Father Ryan's doubts. Father Ryan, a young priest, met with Bishop Henney. The bishop was excited about the new St. John's Cathedral in Milwaukee, calling it the finest cathedral west of New York. Father Ryan, however, was worried about St. Mary's Convent. He told the bishop about the dwindling number of nuns, strange excuses for their absence, and a desperate note from Sister Mary. The bishop's friendly manner changed. He said Mother Catherine, the head of the convent, had explained everything to his satisfaction. Father Ryan insisted, pointing out that 8 nuns had vanished in less than 3 years with no real explanation or contact. The bishop dismissed his concerns, saying the nuns were needed for frontier missions, and warned Father Ryan not to spread rumors that could harm the church's reputation, especially since Mother Catherine had given generously to the cathedral building fund. He told Father Ryan to focus on his own parish duties. An opportunity arises. Father Ryan left discouraged but not defeated. His chance came in March 1858, when Bishop Henney assigned him to collect financial reports from all the churches and religious groups. This gave him a good reason to look at St. Mary's records. He rode his horse and buggy to the convent. The March winds were cold. St. Mary's looked different, the gardens were messy, and the windows seemed dark. The bell, which used to ring often, now rang less and sounded muffled. A cold welcome. Sister Elizabeth greeted him at the door. Her usual smile seemed forced, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Her habit was messy. She said they weren't expecting him and that Mother Catherine was indisposed, meaning unable to see him. Sister Elizabeth wanted him to leave the forms for Mother Catherine to fill out later. But Father Ryan insisted, saying the bishop was clear that he had to review the records himself this year because of financial irregularities in some institutions. He tried to sound confident, but he knew he was young and not very high up in the church. Sister Elizabeth's smile vanished. She said it wasn't possible today because the bookkeeper, Sister Margaret, was with a dying child in the infirmary. Father Ryan said he would wait. He even suggested he could tour the convent, especially the orphanage, which he'd heard so much about. Growing suspicions. Sister Elizabeth's face showed a quick flash of fear or anger, then it was gone. She agreed but told him to avoid the north wing, claiming they had many cases of the flu there. Father Ryan knew the north wing was usually off-limits because it was the nuns' private area. His suspicions grew. The tour showed a convent that was far less active than its reports claimed. Mother Catherine's report said there were 20 orphans, but Father Ryan only counted 7 thin, scared children. When he tried to talk to a little girl, Sister Elizabeth quickly sent her away. The infirmary, which supposedly cared for many local people, only had 3 elderly patients, none with the flu. Sister Margaret was nowhere to be seen. The vanished nuns. Most worrying was the small number of nuns. Father Ryan remembered at least 15 nuns just 3 months earlier, but today he only counted 8, including Sister Elizabeth. When he asked about specific nuns like Sister Rebecca, Sister Josephine, and Sister Clare, he got vague answers about transfers and special missions. Then he casually asked about Sister Mary Collins as they passed the laundry room. Sister Elizabeth paused slightly. She said Sister Mary had been sent to a mission in St. Louis last week because of her experience with orphans. Father Ryan hit his alarm. The nun who wrote the desperate note was now gone too. A hidden horror. His suspicions were now fully aroused. He asked to see the chapel before he left. The chapel, usually perfect, showed signs of neglect, dust, unpolished candle holders, and wilting flowers. It felt empty, as if the sacred place itself knew something was wrong. While Sister Elizabeth was briefly distracted, Father Ryan slipped through a side door that led to the nuns' living area. The hallway was strangely silent. Many rooms were empty, their owners' things gone. As he turned to leave, he heard a faint whimper or moan from behind a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. Unlike the others, this door had a big iron lock. He went closer and listened. The sound came again, clearly human and distressed. "Is someone there?" He whispered through the keyhole. "Do you need help?" Silence, then a hoarse female voice said, "Father. Father, is that you? Please help us, please." Confrontation. Before he could answer, Mother Catherine's unmistakable voice rang out behind him. "Father Ryan, this area is strictly cloistered. Your presence here is most inappropriate." He turned to see Mother Catherine with Sister Margaret and a large, burly man he didn't recognize. The man was dressed like a worker, with thick arms and a menacing scowl. "Forgive me, Mother," Father Ryan said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I got turned around after visiting the chapel." Mother Catherine's pale eyes judged him coldly. She had lost weight, but her authority seemed stronger. "This wing houses sisters under special spiritual direction. Their seclusion is essential. I heard someone calling for help, Father Ryan countered, finding his courage. You heard, Sister, and in the midst of her spiritual exercises, Sister Margaret quickly jumped in. Some of our more dedicated sisters practice self-punishment. Their cries can be misunderstood. Mother Catherine nodded to the burly man. Mr. Callahan will show you out. We will send the financial reports to Milwaukee by week's end. Callahan stepped forward. He gripped Father Ryan's arm firmly. This way, Father, he said, with a hint of threat. Father Ryan caught one last look at the locked door. Who had spoken to him? What did she mean by us? How many women were trapped behind that door? A desperate plea. Father Ryan sped away from the convent, his mind racing. The voice, the locked door, the missing nuns, the scared children, the threatening Callahan, it all pointed to something terrible happening at St. Mary's. This was beyond his power as a parish priest. He needed official help. He decided not to go back to Bishop Henny, who he now suspected was either involved or simply ignoring the problem. Instead, Father Ryan sent an urgent telegram to Archbishop John Hughes in New York. The telegram read, "Grave concerns regarding St. Mary's Convent. Wisconsin. Suspicious disappearances of multiple nuns. Evidence of imprisonment. Possible danger to remaining sisters. Request immediate diocesan investigation. Local bishop unresponsive. Father Thomas Ryan. St. Joseph's Parish. Archbishop Hughes responds." Archbishop Hughes, known for being direct, responded quickly. Without telling Bishop Henny, he sent his personal secretary, Monsignor Patrick Kelly, to do a surprise inspection of St. Mary's. Monsignor Kelly arrived unannounced at the convent on April 17, 1858. Father Ryan and 2 other priests from nearby churches were with him. The spring day was clear, but a feeling of dread hung over the convent buildings. Ravens circled the bell tower, their harsh cries breaking the quiet morning. A tense arrival. Their reception said a lot. Mother Catherine, usually calm and in charge, seemed flustered. Her pale face turned red with what might have been anger or fear when she saw Monsignor Kelly's official robes and sealed documents. The convent seemed in chaos. Nuns scurried around in a panic. Through an open window, Father Ryan saw 2 young nuns rushing papers towards the kitchen, where a large stove was burning, regardless of the warm weather. The sharp smell of burning paper filled the courtyard. Authority asserted. "This is most irregular, Monsignor," Mother Catherine protested as they entered the main hall. Her voice was shaky. "We have protocols for official visitations. Bishop Henny always sends word weeks in advance. Which is precisely why Archbishop Hughes instructed me to forego such notification," Monsignor Kelly replied calmly. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and a face that showed he had seen much in life. He had an authority that even Mother Catherine couldn't directly challenge. "I have here a letter bearing the Archbishop's seal, authorizing a complete inspection of this institution, its records, and all its residents. I trust you will cooperate fully." Mother Catherine quickly glanced at Sister Margaret, who was half hidden in a doorway, her thin face unreadable. A silent message seemed to pass between them. Then Mother Catherine turned back to Monsignor Kelly with a forced smile. "Of course, Monsignor, St. Mary's has nothing to hide. However, I must insist that you respect the enclosure of our cloistered sisters. Some are engaged in spiritual exercises that must not be interrupted. My authority extends to all areas of this convent, Mother Catherine," Monsignor Kelly said, holding up the Archbishop's letter. "No exceptions. Unveiling horrors." What followed was a day-long investigation. Monsignor Kelly's 40-page report would later describe it as uncovering a tableau of horrors unprecedented in the modern church. The inspection team split up. Father Ryan led Monsignor Kelly directly to the locked door in the residential wing. The other priests began interviewing the visible nuns and looking at the financial records. As they approached the north wing, Sister Elizabeth blocked the way. Her usually kind face was now determined. Mother Catherine has forbidden entrance to this area, Monsignor. We have sisters in spiritual retreat. Sister Elizabeth, Monsignor Kelly said gently but firmly, I speak with the authority of Archbishop Hughes. Open the door, or I shall be forced to consider you in violation of your vow of obedience. Sister Elizabeth's calm broke a little. You don't understand what you're doing, she whispered, her voice suddenly desperate. He will be most displeased. He? Father Ryan asked. Do you mean Bishop Henny? Sister Elizabeth only shook her head, looking nervously toward the windows as if expecting someone to appear. After a moment, she stepped aside. The imprisoned nuns. The locked door, when finally opened under threat from the church, revealed a shocking sight. 5 nuns, including the missing Sister Rebecca, were held in what had been a storage room. The room, about 15 feet square, only had a chamber pot and thin mats on the floor. The single high window was boarded over, making the room almost completely dark. The women were pale, starving, and showed signs of being hurt. Their habits were torn and dirty, their faces thin with hunger and fear. One of them, later identified as Sister Josephine Brady, was heavily pregnant. Father Ryan turned away, fighting nausea, while Monsignor Kelly made the sign of the cross in horror. In the name of all that's holy, the Monsignor whispered, what has happened here? Sister Rebecca, once strong and smiling, now a bony figure with sunken eyes, struggled to her feet. Father Ryan, she managed, her voice broken from not being used or from screaming, you came back. They're preparing us, she whispered as Father Ryan helped her to a chair. For the doctor, for the house in Chicago. What doctor? Monsignor Kelly asked gently, kneeling beside her. What house in Chicago? Dr. Matthews, Sister Rebecca replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. He comes to examine us, to see which ones are suitable. She closed her eyes, trembling. The men pay more for nuns, for brides of Christ. That's what Mother Catherine tells them. Disturbing discoveries. While Father Ryan and Monsignor Kelly cared for the imprisoned nuns, the other priests made equally disturbing discoveries. In Sister Margaret's private room, hidden behind a door in the infirmary, they found shelves of suspicious medicines. Laudanum, chloroform, and other drugs used to make people unconscious. A leather journal listed treatments given to various nuns, with notes about their reactions and whether they were ready for transportation. At the same time, the priests checking the financial records found alarming differences. The convent reported very little income, but its accounts showed regular, large deposits of money, far more than a convent on the frontier could honestly earn. Most unsettling were coded entries about packages delivered and special commissions completed, each matching the disappearance of a nun. One entry read, transferred Sister Agnes O'Connor, May 4, 1855, commissioned $400. Package delivered to Chicago establishment, condition excellent. Another, even more disturbing, Sister Teresa Donovan, unsuitable for transfer due to resistance, terminated November 1856, no commission. A horrific truth uncovered. As the investigation continued, a pattern of terrible abuse and exploitation emerged. By carefully questioning the traumatized nuns, Monsignor Kelly put the truth together. Mother Catherine, Sister Elizabeth, and Sister Margaret were not true religious leaders. They were impostors who had entered the Catholic system years earlier. Sister Claire O'Donnell, one of the rescued nuns, bravely shared what she knew. "I overheard them one night," she whispered, clutching a blanket. Mother Catherine was arguing with Sister Margaret about their past. She called her Catherine, said they'd come too far to risk exposure now, that they'd changed identities before and could do it again if necessary. The real Mother Catherine Murphy had died shortly after arriving in Wisconsin, poisoned. According to testimony from Sister Margaret's former assistant in the infirmary, she added something to Mother Catherine's evening tea. The original Mother Catherine began vomiting blood that very night. Sister Margaret diagnosed it as consumption and isolated her. None of us were permitted to attend her in her final days. The 3 senior nuns then took control of the convent. They made connections with a network of houses of charity across the Midwest, which were actually brothels for wealthy clients with specific desires. Young nuns who caught their eye, especially those seen as beautiful, innocent, or gentle, were set up for a terrible fate. The dark business. First, they were isolated through increasingly harsh punishments for made-up mistakes. Then they were drugged, often with laudanum from Sister Margaret's supplies. The chosen nuns would be violated within the convent itself by paying benefactors. Wealthy men from Chicago, Milwaukee, and even St. Louis paid high prices to defile brides of Christ. They would come after evening prayers when the convent was silent, Sister Rebecca explained, her voice flat, as if speaking without emotion was the only way she could tell such horrors. Men in fine clothes, smelling of cologne and whiskey. Mother Catherine would lead them to the north wing where we were kept. They paid extra to have us wear our habits during the violation. Those who became pregnant, like Sister Josephine, were kept isolated until they gave birth. Afterward, they were sent to brothels in Chicago or St. Louis, where they were forced into prostitution. Their religious background and forced pregnancy were advertised as special attractions for twisted clients. Many died within years from disease or abuse. Sister Margaret examined us regularly, Sister Rebecca continued. She kept records of our monthly cycles. If we missed our bleeding, she would laugh and tell Mother Catherine we'd be especially valuable now. The men paid more for those carrying children. The orphanage and the unspeakable end. The orphanage was both a cover and another source of victims. Older girls nearing puberty would suddenly be adopted by generous benefactors, but in reality, they were sold to the same network of brothels. Boys were indeed placed with families, but as unpaid farm laborers, with Mother Catherine collecting large fees for placing them. Most horrifying were the fates of those who fought back too strongly or threatened to expose the operation. Sister Teresa Donovan, who had questioned the disappearances, had not been sent to Montreal as claimed. According to Sister Rebecca, Teresa had been held in the locked room for weeks, repeatedly assaulted, and when her spirit remained unbroken, she was strangled by the man called Callahan. Her body, along with those of at least 3 other nuns who had resisted, was buried in unmarked graves in the convent's vegetable garden. Mother Catherine made us watch, Sister Claire said, tears streaming down her face. She said it was a lesson in obedience. Sister Teresa fought until the end. She was praying the rosary even as Callahan tightened the rope around her neck. The aftermath and escapes. As evening fell on that terrible April day, Monsignor Kelly ordered the immediate closure of St. Mary's Convent. The surviving nuns were taken to safety, local police were called, and guards were posted to stop anyone from escaping or removing evidence. Mother Catherine, Sister Elizabeth, and Sister Margaret were placed under church arrest, confined to their cells until civil authorities could take them. I was following orders, Sister Elizabeth whimpered as she was led to her cell. Mother Catherine said it was God's will, that the money was needed for the church's greater glory. Mother Catherine remained silent, her pale eyes showing nothing as the door closed on her temporary prison. Only Sister Margaret showed emotion, a strange half-smile on her thin lips as she was led away. "You understand nothing of what you've discovered," she told Monsignor Kelly. "We serve a higher purpose than you can imagine." But the church's attempt to handle the matter quietly soon fell apart. Mr. Callahan, the burly enforcer who had been absent during the inspection, returned after dark. Finding the convent guarded, he fled to Chicago, where he apparently warned his partners. By the time local sheriffs arrived the next morning with arrest warrants, Mother Catherine and Sister Margaret had somehow escaped their confined rooms. Only Sister Elizabeth remained, found kneeling in the chapel in a state of shock. The window was still locked from the inside, reported the priest guarding Mother Catherine's room. The door showed no signs of forced exit. "It's as if she vanished into thin air." More likely, the convent's long history had secret passages unknown even to the church, escape routes perhaps from when the building was a lumber baron's mansion, where secret meetings and quick getaways might have been expected in those rough frontier days. The full extent of the crime. The civil investigation that followed revealed the full horror of the operation. Financial records from Mother Catherine's hidden safe showed transactions totaling over $100,000, which would be about $3 million today, over 8 years. Coded ledgers identified 23 nuns and 17 orphan girls who had been trafficked to brothels across the Midwest. Letters with business partners in Chicago, St. Louis, and even New Orleans detailed the specialized services offered and the high prices demanded. "A genuine sister of charity, untouched before our establishment, minimum $300, read one letter to a Chicago brothel owner. Special requests, habit, religious implements, additional $50 per session. Pregnant sisters command $500 for exclusive patrons." Most damning was a small leather notebook found sewn into Sister Elizabeth's mattress. The notebook contained dates, names, and horrific details of the fates of each disappeared nun. Some entries were cold and clinical: Sister Agnes, delivered to Chicago Operation September 1855, valued at $400. Others showed the writer's disturbing pleasure in the suffering they caused: Sister Teresa, fought magnificently. Callahan enjoyed subduing her. Buried east corner of Beanfield, November 1856. The notebook also mentioned the doctor, clearly Dr. William Matthews, a once respected physician from Chicago, whose career had ended in scandal after claims of inappropriate behavior with female patients. According to the notebook, he was involved in examining the nuns and determining their suitability. Dr. Matthews, the doctor, checked the nuns, confirming they were healthy and, shockingly, virgins. This made them more valuable in the brothels. He even noted that Sister Rebecca was perfect for the best spots, suggesting she be used a lot before being sent to Chicago. Investigators searched the convent grounds, led by clues in a notebook. In the vegetable garden, they found the bodies of 4 nuns buried shallowly among the plants. Early tests, though basic for today, confirmed Sister Rebecca's story: these women had been strangled and quickly buried. One victim, Sister Mary Collins, was identified by a small medal. Her grave looked very fresh, suggesting she was killed just before Father Ryan's visit, maybe after she delivered the note that exposed the convent. Sister Elizabeth Foster, whose real name was Margaret Wilson, was the only one of the 3 leaders to face justice. She was found too mentally ill for trial and sent to an asylum, where she died in 1863, never speaking again. Her medical records show she was mostly frozen, but screamed at night about a master coming to punish her. Mother Catherine Murphy, real name unknown, and Sister Margaret Clark, Catherine Donovan, vanished. Rumors placed them in New Orleans and Havana, running similar schemes with young immigrant women, but they were never caught. A nationwide alert described them: Mother Catherine, about 45, 5 feet 8 inches, blue eyes, graying brown hair, a slight Boston accent, and a commanding presence. Sister Margaret, about 40, 5 feet 10 inches, very thin, dark eyes, black hair with early gray, and precise speech, even using medical terms. Despite big rewards, they seemed to disappear. Occasional reports of them on steamboats or starting finishing schools popped up, but they were always gone by the time police arrived. Mr. Callahan, or James Callahan of Chicago, was caught 6 months later in a brothel raid. He was hanged for killing a police officer during his arrest. Before he died, he confirmed many details of the St. Mary's operation but said he didn't know where the leaders were. They planned for this, he told the chaplain. Mother Catherine always said they had escape routes, new identities. They'd done it before, changed their skins like snakes. When asked about the master, in Sister Elizabeth's notes, Callahan got angry. Don't ask about him. He's not someone you want to know. Who this master was remains a mystery. The church quickly covered up the scandal. Bishop Henny was quietly moved to a monastery in Europe. His letters show he was deeply troubled, writing, "The blood of those poor women cries out to heaven." He believed the funds Mother Catherine sent were for missionary work and never questioned it. The convent buildings were torn down, the land sold, and the money used to build a legitimate orphanage. Official church statements never mentioned the bodies or the crimes. The site was unofficially unholy in a private ceremony. The surviving nuns were sent to other convents, forced to sign agreements that would excommunicate them if they ever spoke about St. Mary's. Most lived in silence, their pain unaddressed. Sister Josephine Brady had a daughter 2 months after being rescued. Despite her pleas, the church gave the baby to a Catholic family, keeping the birth secret. This further traumatized Sister Josephine, who died by suicide in 1861, leaving a note, "I cannot forget, I cannot forgive." Sister Rebecca Murphy, surprisingly, became a reformer. She left religious life and, using the name Rachel Martin, published an anonymous book called The Dark Convent, in 1865. Though the church called it Protestant propaganda, surviving copies matched the official investigation. She wrote that St. Mary's wasn't just 3 evil women, but a system that valued silence over truth. The church quickly bought and destroyed most copies of her book. Rachel Martin vanished after 1866, some believe she started a shelter for abused women in California. Father Thomas Ryan, who exposed the horrors, was initially praised. But as the church worried about the scandal, he was sent to a distant parish. His journal, found after his death in 1886, reveals his ongoing pain. His last entry, days before he died, reads, 28 years since St. Mary's, and still the church keeps silent. If the church will not speak for them, then I pray that someday someone will find this account and remember them. The wider impact. The St. Mary's scandal sparked more inspections of Catholic institutions across the Midwest. Though none were as bad as St. Mary's, several smaller operations were found, suggesting Mother Catherine's scheme was a template. In Chicago, police raids freed former nuns and young women forced into prostitution, their stories matching St. Mary's. One survivor, M.L., confirmed Mother Catherine herself had brought her to Chicago. The brothel owners implicated powerful Chicago businessmen and politicians as clients and investors, but these cases mysteriously fell apart. The Chicago Tribune noted this suspicious pattern, saying justice only reached those without powerful friends. In St. Louis, investigations into similar operations were quickly stopped. Monsignor Kelly, who led the St. Mary's investigation, was severely beaten after trying to follow leads there. His letters show his frustration. I believe we have uncovered merely the visible portion of a much larger evil. The survivors faced immense challenges. Those not physically abused still had deep mental scars. Sister Claire O'Donnell, forced to help restrain Sister Teresa during her murder, developed severe PTSD. She was institutionalized before disappearing. The 5 women rescued from the locked room suffered the most, and the 19th-century church was not equipped to help them heal. Sister Josephine's suicide is one tragic example. Sister Maria Fitzpatrick remained in the church but was described as unstable. Sister Anne Sullivan, however, became an advocate, quietly creating support networks for abused nuns, writing, "What happened to us was not God's will but human evil cloaking itself in sacred garments." The full number of victims remains unknown. While 23 nuns and 17 orphan girls were confirmed trafficked or murdered, Sister Elizabeth's notebook mentioned rural acquisitions, young women abducted from isolated farms, never reported missing. How many of these disappearances were linked to St. Mary's is a haunting question. Of the 23 nuns who vanished, only 9 were definitively found. The fate of the other 14 remains a mystery, likely sold to distant operations. A missionary in San Francisco in 1872 reported meeting a woman in a brothel who claimed to be Sister Catherine Walsh from St. Mary's, but she died before confirmation. The biggest mystery surrounds Mother Catherine Murphy and Sister Margaret Clark. How did they infiltrate religious orders? Records suggest Catherine Donovan, Sister Margaret's real name, was expelled from a convent in Ireland. They likely met in America and developed their scheme. Their disappearance led to a huge manhunt. Reports placed them in New Orleans, Havana, and Mexico City, always tied to religious or charity groups for the wealthy. The last credible report from a Chicago detective placed them in Veracruz, Mexico, in 1863, running a finishing school. He was violently warned to stop investigating, and local officials helping him were found dead, suggesting they had protection at the highest levels of society. The lingering legacy. St. Mary's deepened anti-Catholic feelings in America, leading Catholic communities to become more closed off, reinforcing the secrecy that enabled the abuse. It also set a pattern for how institutions would respond to abuse for generations: limited accountability, protecting higher authorities, silencing survivors, and returning to normalcy with little real change. Archbishop Hughes privately admitted the system had fundamental flaws, but his recommendations were ignored. The physical traces of St. Mary's are gone. Buildings demolished, land sold, now a suburban development. Church records were heavily edited, damning documents sealed or destroyed. Even the graves of the murdered nuns were unmarked. Yet, the story lives on through scattered documents, journals, and oral histories. These fragments show not just the horror, but the systemic failures, unquestioned authority, vulnerable communities, and the human capacity for both evil and courage. Father Thomas Ryan's plea resonates: remember them, remember that they lived, that they suffered, and that their suffering mattered. The Wisconsin Historical Society has some materials on St. Mary's, including a letter from Sister Anne Sullivan to Sister Josephine Brady's adopted daughter. Though never sent, its closing lines are powerful: "Should you ever learn of your origins, know this: your mother was not shamed but brave." The evil done at St. Mary's was not of God or genuine faith, but of human cruelty wearing sacred garments. St. Mary's became a deliberately hidden watershed moment. The investigation revealed widespread corruption, implicating church officials, businessmen, and politicians. Though the church blamed 3 imposters, leaked documents showed Bishop Henney received at least 7 letters about disappearances and money problems, each followed by a large donation from Mother Catherine. One damning exchange revealed a priest found a blood-stained nun's habit, but the bishop told him to return it and said red paint was used for theatrical performances, followed by a $500 donation. A local historian's grandmother also said people knew something was wrong. Screams were heard at night, dismissed as spiritual exercises. Local children avoided the convent, scared of the sad ladies in black, watching with empty eyes. In 1890, almost 30 years later, an old woman named Mary Callahan, sister of the executed James Callahan, came to the Pinkerton Detective Agency in Chicago. She had a leather case with documents her brother had hidden. These papers included letters between Mother Catherine and clients, financial records, and, most shocking, a list of church leaders and politicians who had either used or protected the operation. Mary Callahan told the detective, "My brother wasn't innocent. He did terrible things there, things he told me before they hanged him. But he was just a helper in this devil's work." She said he told her where to find the papers, to keep them safe until the main people behind the evil were dead. Now they're gone, the truth can be told without fear. The detective, a strong Catholic, was so upset by the papers that he gave them straight to Cardinal James Gibbons in Baltimore, not his bosses. The cardinal wrote to Mary Callahan, saying he got the papers and would take action. No public investigation followed, and the documents vanished into church records. Cardinal Gibbons wrote to Mary, "While I share your horror, I must consider the damage that public exposure would cause to the faith of countless innocent Catholics." He suggested it was best to keep the darkness buried now that the main criminals were dead and the victims were home to God's mercy. Mary Callahan tried to tell her story to the public, but newspapers wouldn't print it, saying she lacked proof. When she tried to publish a pamphlet herself, the printer suddenly backed out after men in church clothes visited him. Her house was broken into twice, but nothing valuable was taken. In 1892, she gave copies of the most important documents to her nephew, telling him to keep them for the future. In 1908, a fire in the Baltimore church records room destroyed many historical papers, including, it said, all of the Callahan documents. Church officials called it an unfortunate accident. But a former church archivist, Thomas Moran, claimed on his deathbed in 1947 that the fire was suspiciously limited to specific shelves. Only the St. Mary's records and similar sensitive materials were destroyed, he said. He had been told to store those specific documents together. When the fire happened, it burned exactly those shelves and no others. Draw your own conclusions. The last confirmed part of the St. Mary's story happened in 1912, when workers in Veracruz, Mexico, fixing up an old house, found a hidden room. Inside were the mummified bodies of two old women. With them were Catholic religious items, fake IDs in many names, and a lot of American and Mexican money. Most telling was a small golden locket with a tiny picture of St. Mary's Convent from the 1850s. The local paper, La Verdad de Veracruz, reported on March 12, 1912, that the bodies were sitting in chairs facing each other, as if they died at the same time, perhaps while having tea. The cups had traces of a strong poison. Whether it was suicide or murder isn't known. Mexican authorities, unsure what they had found, eventually told American newspapers. Several St. Mary's survivors, old women themselves by then, recognized items found with the bodies as belonging to Mother Catherine Murphy and Sister Margaret Clark. The women seemed to have died around 1880, living their last years in wealthy isolation, but never truly escaping their secrets. Most disturbing was a leather journal found with the bodies. Its entries suggested the women continued their operations in Mexico for nearly 20 years before they died. Words like acquisitions, placements, and special clients were similar to the coded language in the St. Mary's records. The journal's last entry, dated the day they likely died, had a mysterious message: "He comes tonight." We have failed him for the last time. Who he was, a human accomplice or something else, remains one of the case's lasting mysteries. Some think it's linked to secret religious groups, others to powerful people involved in their human trafficking. Investigations in the Veracruz house revealed more horrors. Under the garden, police found the remains of at least 12 young women, buried over 2 decades. Records suggested these women were lured from poor families with promises of jobs or religious training, only to suffer similar fates as the St. Mary's nuns. The New York Times, in a rare article about St. Mary's, wrote, "The evil that began in Wisconsin did not end there. It merely moved south, like a cancer." It made people wonder how many other such operations existed hidden behind respectable appearances. The American Catholic Church's reaction to the Veracruz discoveries was quiet. A brief statement said that people linked to a disbanded Wisconsin religious community were found dead, but stressed they had been excommunicated and were acting without church permission. No mention was made of the trafficking or its victims. Today, a small memorial garden stands in Milwaukee, started in 2010 by someone who wanted to remember the forgotten women of St. Mary's. The church doesn't officially recognize it, and no names are listed. But every spring, flowers mysteriously appear there, left, some say, by descendants of Sister Mary Collins, whose bravery in giving a note to a farm boy brought the truth to light. Amateur historians looking into the case have faced odd problems. Records disappear from archives before they can visit. Permission to see church documents is taken away without reason. Several independent researchers have reported strange things, threatening calls, break-ins where only research materials were touched, and even threats from unknown men. "Someone still doesn't want this story told in full," wrote historian Rebecca Lawson in 2003. Powerful groups keep trying to hide this dark part of American religious history, either to protect famous families or the church's reputation. The Wisconsin countryside has long since covered up the St. Mary's land. New towns, churches, and generations have grown up, unaware of the horrors there. But on some autumn nights, when fog rolls in from Lake Michigan and the wind whispers, locals sometimes hear faint sounds, some say women chanting prayers, others, muffled cries for help. Whether it's just the wind or something more is for each person to decide. In 2018, while building a new housing development near the old convent, workers found a small metal box. Inside was a rosary, a folded nun's veil, and a handwritten list of 23 names with the words, "Remember us." Officials gave the items to the church archives, where they are reportedly still kept, unlisted and out of reach to researchers. The family of Jimmy Fletcher, the farm boy who delivered Sister Mary's desperate note, has their own memorial. For 5 generations, they've kept a small shelf in their kitchen with a silver cross, believed to be the one Sister Mary gave Jimmy for his courage. Beside it is a handwritten list of the nuns' names, copied from newspapers. "Great-great-grandpa Jimmy said we should never forget those ladies," Robert Fletcher, the current head of the family, told a newspaper in 2020. He said sometimes the truth gets buried, but that doesn't make it any less true. Those women lived. They suffered. They mattered. What's clear is that between 1854 and 1862, in a Wisconsin convent thought to be holy, terrible evil happened. That such evil was possible, and that the systems meant to stop it actually allowed it, reminds us how bad people can be and how easily we can deny things. Maybe the true horror of St. Mary's isn't just what happened inside those walls, but how easily it was erased from history once the walls came down. Remember Sister Agnes, Sister Bernadette, Sister Teresa, and all the others. Remember that they lived, that they suffered, and that their suffering mattered.